This is the Film Grinders Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Hauka. Me, Jacob Hall, and David Hollinshead talk all things NFL, mock drafts, prospect profiles, free agency, and everything else going on in the pro football world. We all hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. It was day one of free agency, the time of overspending in the National Football League. So we're just going to go team by team right now. And we're just going to take a look briefly at their day one and give them just give them a letter grade. Like we're teachers. Jake is a teacher, so he'll be good at this. We'll start with Arizona. Here's the big one, right? Josh Sweat. This team with Jonathan Gannon as the head coach, since he's got there for 2 years, this is a team that plays solid defense because they're very schematically sound. Gannon always has a good game plan for them. And they play above the level of players they have. They don't have good edge rushers. They were kind of getting by with Dennis Gardick this year and a couple of other depth guys. This is a really good signing for them. Josh Sweat really has some jump. We saw it in the Super Bowl with the Eagles. This is a good edge player, and it's not an insane deal. 4-year, $76.4 million deal with 41 of that guaranteed. I think this is a really good signing for them.
I agree. I mean, he obviously, like we talked about the Super Bowl, I think he could have been Super Bowl MVP. He was in the backfield all the time. I think he had a couple sacks as well. I like the connection as well with Gannon, who coached him as his D coordinator in Philadelphia for that first Super Bowl run. So edge defenders are not as easy to find as you'd think. And he is such a uber athlete as well. I think he's going to age well. So I have no qualms with that. It's the price of doing business. It's a big contract, but it's for a guy who has legit upside as a double digit sack artist. So I'm a big fan of him, and I think it's a solid move for a team that really needs that defensive identity.
Yeah, and I think the edge position is a position where if you know a guy's a player, you go out and you spend money on him. It's okay to do that, right? This isn't, I know with running backs, we kind of had a resurgence last year, but that's typically a position you don't want to do that in unless you're sure. The edge position, you need it, right? Especially with this year's edge class where there's probably 3 guys where you can say, okay, those guys are going to be very good NFL players, one of them being generational and Abdul Carter. And then after that, it's kind of, you don't really know. They're really boom or bust. So you know Josh Sweat can play. He's a stud. This is a good move. I'm going to give them B+, A-. I think this is a good first day for them.
I'm going to say B+, because I think getting the high quality edge player, the most sought after edge player in this free agency cycle is a huge win for them. And I can't really, we're still in the very infancy of free agency, but that's a big win to get a guy of that quality this early, who's also young as well. I think that's the other part. Free agents don't really come out. They're usually signed into their late 20s. So he's I think 24, 25. He's quite young. So I'm excited to see him progress in Arizona. 27 years old.
So next up, Atlanta Falcons. They didn't really do anything today. They cut Grady Jarrett, though, who is now he's kind of at the end of the line. Used to be an unblockable player, just an absolute nuisance up front, but they released him. 10 seasons in Atlanta. For a D tackle, that's a long time to last. He's still a solid player, but he's not what he used to be, and he's not worth a massive price tag, and we'll go over that in a little bit here. But they're going to get a non-applicable grade here, an incomplete, because they haven't done anything yet. We'll move on to Buffalo, signing Josh Palmer from the Chargers. Good Canadian boy. It's a solid signing for them. They also lost Mac Hollins to free agency, who was kind of a do-it-all guy for them. Not a star by any means. The guy that refuses to wear shoes even in the freezing cold, just on the field. Interesting character he is, but they lose him. They bring in Josh Palmer. Jake, that's an upgrade, hey?
Yeah, he's had moments where he's had to fill in for Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and whoever in LA, and he's had good reliable numbers. I think Buffalo, like they must have really hated Stephon Diggs, like because they're just bringing like it's a big contract to give Josh Palmer, and they gave Shakir like a massive contract earlier in the offseason, right? So it makes you wonder what happened at the end there. But yeah, they're giving Josh Allen as many weapons as they can. I don't think like Dalton Kincaid has kind of worked out the way they probably wanted. So another big body like a Josh Palmer, I think, is a solid move. And also locking up Josh Allen, even though it's like the richest contract ever, it still makes sense. Like this is what a team like Cincinnati doesn't like, whether they choose to understand it or they just don't have the money. I think like signing players early to long contracts is generally the best way to go, especially for Josh Allen. Like he's going to be a Buffalo Bill for life, most likely. And this is how you make sure that
you don't encounter a generational player like him very often, right? So you need to lock that guy up and make that guy a Bill for life. They also get Michael Hecht, who was on the Rams previously. Good edge player. Like he's underrated. He doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he gets good pressure if you watch him play, and he's pretty versatile. Like in their base front, he gets out and is solid in coverage for his size. So good depth piece for them too. We know that McDermott knows defense, so that's a good piece for them, and they don't have a lot of cap left. So with what cap they had, I'm going to give them an A, especially because of the Josh Allen signing. Like you said, he's a Bill for life probably now. Here's a team that was very active, and they needed to be because they had lots of cap space, and they were bad last year. Carolina Panthers. Bunch of signings here. Bobby Brown, not the R&B singer. Tershawn Warden, Patrick Jones, J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, and then Jake, one of the Raiders' former safeties, Trayvon Moehrig. So very active day for them. Trayvon's a really good safety. That's a really good pickup for them. This is a team that needed a lot of help. I think they're starting to get there. What do you think about those signings?
And they almost, at one point, it looked like they signed Milton Williams as well. Earlier in the day, it was reported that he had signed with the Panthers, and then I guess Patriots upped the offer. But yeah, they have a lot of ground to cover. Again, J.C. Horn hasn't been healthy, or wasn't at least in his first couple of years in the league. I'm a fan of his. I think his metrics speak for themselves. So locking him up. I think the next question for me is like, what are they going to do on offense? Like, are they going to try and get a Ted McMillan? Like, hope he falls. I think they pick at 8. Like, who knows? Because they don't have enough weapons, I think, for Bryce Young. And I think like they're not going to take a quarterback. That's out of the question. I think Bryce played well enough last year where you want to give that another shot. I'm curious to see if there's any receivers even worth signing at this point. Not a ton left, mostly dried up. But yeah, I'm more interested on the offensive side for them, what they do with Bryce Young.
Yeah, I wonder if they're betting on Leggett to take kind of the next step this year. Also, I can't remember his first name, but the tight end Sanders that they got last year in the draft.
Tavion Sanders.
He was really good for them. The numbers don't really show it, but that's a guy that was constantly getting open. And when you watch the coach's film, you go, wow, like that, this guy is going to be a player. So that's something to look out for too. I wonder what they're going to do in the draft, but I think this is a solid day for them. I'm not seeing any crazy overpays, which when you're not a good team, when they have as much cap space as they do, I think it's a common mistake to overspend on a ton of players that are just above replacement level, and they haven't seemed to do that. So I'm going to give them a nice little B+, especially if J.C. Horn can stay healthy and stay on the field. This is an A, because he's a great corner, super rangy. I really like his game. It's just the only problem with him has been the injury concerns, right? So for me, this is a B+, A. Chicago Bears. Interesting day for Chicago. So they get Drew Dahlman, the number 12 ranked free agent, signed him to a 3-year, $42 million contract. Very good center. If you watch the film or look at the analytics, like this guy is a legit center. Caleb needs extra protection. We saw it last year. So this is a great signing. Then on the flip side of that, Jake, Grady Jarrett, 3-year, $43 million deal for a D tackle that is still solid, but not what he used to be and is really starting to decline.
And not even just Grady Jarrett, but like, help me pronounce the name next here. Deo Odinjabo?
That's close, yeah.
So again, that's another big contract too. I actually like what they did getting Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. Like very minor draft compensation for two hopeful starters. Like I liked the process of what they've done with their offensive line. Clearly, Ben Johnson has that influence on them to get. I mean, their offensive line will be totally remade, and they still might draft the tackle where they're slotted. So I do like the offensive side. I think the Grady Jarrett contract. I can agree with you on that. I think it's a pretty rich contract, but I think it shows that like they're tired of kind of being the fourth team in the NFC North. I think they're really trying to take that next step with Caleb Williams and with Ben Johnson. So I like the offensive moves. I'm a little more pensive about the defensive moves.
Yeah, I would agree. I think trade-wise, I'm giving them an A+. Those were, as you mentioned, two great moves to solidify the offensive line. I like the signing of center, which you desperately needed. The other thing, like Caleb doesn't have any receivers to throw to right now, really, right? Cole Kmet is a decent tight end is a great blocker. He's slow. He doesn't really separate. He's good for 5 to 7 yards a catch, right? Rome Odunze is not a burner by any means. He's a one-on-one possession receiver. Keenan Allen, I believe, is leaving. Same thing. Separator in the slot can get you 10 yards. There's no burners on this team, right? And I know there's not a lot in free agency right now, but they need to make a move to get a receiver in some way because Caleb doesn't really have anyone to throw right now. And now you have the offensive line that gives you more time, but they need receivers big time. They need some speed. I'm going to give them like a C. Just because of the Jarrett contract, that's just, to me, not good business, in my opinion. So, what's your grade?
I would go up a little bit. I'm going to say, just because I think the offensive line is such a crucial part of what they have to do moving forward, I'm going to give them a B. Because I do like the potential for Jonah Jackson to actually play and start, because he didn't do much of that with the Rams. And I think Joe Thuney, if he's not pressed to play tackle and he's a legit guard and he just plays guard, is one of the better guards in football. So and then Drew Dahlman as well, like a really good, reliable center, such an important piece for a young quarterback. So I like that side. And then, like we mentioned, defense maybe a little less.
Yeah, so you know what? Here, offense, I'm going to give them an A. Defense, I'm going to give them a C.
And then you meet in the middle. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Cincinnati, here's a team where you have probably a top 5 quarterback in the league in Joe Burrow at worst. He was incredible last year. Your offense looked pretty good for the most part, but wow, was that defense bad. Just awful. Like, could not get off the field. You have a defensive coordinator who's renowned for being really good, got fired because your defense is just so inept. So they get Samaje Perine back from the Chiefs, who was on the Bengals for quite a while. Re-signed Cody Ford, then re-signed Joseph Asai on the edge. BJ Hill is coming back, who is a decent piece to your team. Then they're going to bring in TJ Sladen, another defensive tackle, which is important because they were awful against the run last year. So they are trying to beef up the middle, which is good. They're pretty underwhelming moves for the most part, with a team that their contention window, T. Higgins just got franchised. This is a team that their window is closing very rapidly right now. What do you think of these moves?
Yeah, and I think the thing with their window, which is, if you're a Bengals fan, kind of scary, is like, how long is Joe Burrow going to hang around, right? If T. Higgins just decides, you know what, I'm not going to play on this tag, or I'm going to ask for a trade. Like, he's made it very clear. Like, Joe Burrow is like, we want T. Higgins, we want Jamar Chase, who's also unsigned, by the way, or playing on a contract that I doubt he'll really play on. So I just worry about the business side for Cincinnati, which is not like a new thought because historically they've cheaped out where they shouldn't. And those player polls, the NFLPA polls where they rate like the food and the gym and the family and all this stuff, they're always like dead at the bottom because they just don't have an owner, I guess, who's willing to buy in. They have like 4 scouts. I saw a tweet that was kind of funny, just side note about the Bengals, where they were saying like the Bengals are going to get so mad when they see all this information the next day in the newspaper. Like they just don't, they don't feel like a modern franchise. They just feel kind of stuck in the past. And it would be scary if I'm Joe Burrow. I'm like, am I really going to like hitch my wagon to like Mike Brown and like this team? And, my coach is kind of he's like a good coach. Is he a great coach? Probably not. I don't know. I'm kind of a little puzzled by them. Always, every offseason.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Aaron Rodgers' prime after his Super Bowl win with Green Bay, where
that's a good way to put it.
They refused to sign free agents minus Julius Peppers. That was their big signing. Other than that, it was, we're going to build through the draft. They drafted terribly, like really badly. Go back and look at those drafts, guys. It's bad. It's really bad. Ted Thompson, who at one point was a great GM, did not have a good latter half of his career. That's what it reminds me of. Like, it's the same thing to me. Like, they're just getting by and they're saying, hey, Joe, go be a hero. This is what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers. And it's kind of the same thing to me. I don't know. Looks the same to me. So far, day one, again, free agency period is young. I'm giving them a C. Like, these are very underwhelming signings. I like the BJ Hill, bringing him back. He's a good D tackle. Kind of get what they're trying to do with Slayton, try to kind of solidify the middle, but pretty underwhelming. I don't think that really elevates you that much. I'm not into it.
I think for me, it's a C- because of everything that's happening with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And it's just this kind of on the outside looking in, we're not in the locker room, obviously, but it seems like a pretty toxic situation brewing, right? With like, T. Higgins is not thrilled about this, right? Like he wants security. And he's proven it. Like, yeah, the hamstring injuries are annoying, but like when he's on the field, he's awesome. And Jamar Chase is going to get upwards of $40 million a year. Or is he? I don't know. But you're going to have to keep Joe. Yeah, Joe has to throw to somebody. Like, it just feels like they're just, like you said, wasting the prime of a really, really good, elite even quarterback.
It's unfortunate. Moving to the Cleveland Browns. So obviously, Myles Garrett, big re-signing. They made a trade today for Kenny Pickett for Dorian Robinson. DTR has not really found his game. He's gotten his chance to start. He hasn't really found it, unfortunately. I kind of liked him out of college, but he hasn't been able to kind of solidify like even a backup role in the league. So bringing in Kenny Pickett, who's fine. He's a solid backup. With their quarterback situation, what it is, not a terrible move at all. The Myles Garrett signing, I found this tweet, which is quite funny. Someone tweeted, "The Browns are now rostered like my 7-year-old Pokemon team. 1 level 100 Gyarados and some Rattatas."
That's pretty true. Like, that's crazy. Like, if you're a Brown fan, honestly, like, pretend you're a Brown fan, and then the second overall pick is Shedeur Sanders. A little part of you is like, oh man, like, you could be as happy as you want. You're getting a quarterback and it's exciting, but like, given the track record of the team too, you're probably pretty nervous about entering the season. So I don't know. I'm not sure I really buy what they're selling right now.
Yeah, I'm going to give them an incomplete. They cut Dalvin Tomlinson post June 1st cut. He was solid on the inside for them, but the deal was pretty big, and I think they're trying to save cap room. So we're going to give them an incomplete for now. Moving on to America's team, the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
So they've kind of been in this space for quite a while, Jake, where Jerry Jones seems to really like signing players that have big names that are well past their prime. This is kind of You saw it last year with bringing Zeke back, who he is a shell of himself. Anthony Barr back a couple years ago. Eric Kendricks. Those type of players that were once household names that are not, they don't really have it anymore. Father Age is unbeaten. So
Right.
this year, they bring in Javonte Williams, who that's not the case with him. He's a very good back still. So that's a solid signing for them. Marquise Bell, 3-year deal to $12 million. He's okay safety and then a long snapper so far. This Dallas team is so far off of competing, in my opinion. I think they had a C- to D coaching hire in Brian Schottenheimer to be the head coach. That
Yeah.
you go from, I never thought I'd say going away from Mike McCarthy would be a downgrade, but here we are. Where does this team go from here?
I mean, they're the different Javonte Williams. I would say I prefer Rico Dowdle even. I think Rico showed enough last year where you kind of want to see that through, and it doesn't sound like they're going to bring back Rico. And they're in an interesting spot, right? Because they have Micah Parsons who needs a contract. And that whole situation doesn't seem super comfortable either. And I think, what did Jerry Jones, what was the quote that was floating around before free agency? They're going to be selectively aggressive. And it's like, okay, well, like, let's see it, because re-signing Odigizua is great. Like, he's a very much an impact player, and their defense is going to rely on him and Micah Parsons. But there's just not enough on the offense either. Like, the days of them having this big bruising offensive line, those are like 3, 4, 5 years in the past at this point. They're locked into Dak. And I think Dak's a fine quarterback. So they're locked into that though. So it's like, how do you elevate everywhere else? And it can't just be CeeDee Lamb. And I'd honestly say it can't just be Brandon Cooks. Like, I think they're one of those sneaky teams that I think might draft a skill position when they're up, whether it's Janty or it's Ted McMillan, Luther Burden. I think they need like juice on that offense more than anything.
There's just so many holes on that roster. Like, there's so many. You have a couple of things. You have Micah Parsons. You have an okay secondary. Their corners are a little boomer bust for me. But, like, you have some pieces there, but there are so many holes in other places. And day one, they're not filling them, so they're going to get a C- for me for today anyway.
Yeah, I would probably just lean into that as well. I just don't think there's enough. Down, and again, it's day one. It's, I would say, a mediocre to middle of the pack free agency crop. Can't grill them too much, but when it comes to August, like, I'd be surprised if they were dramatically different, if they had the ability to change themselves that much. I think they're kind of locked into who they are, and then hopefully they hit it big in the draft.
Moving on to Denver, big signings for them, bringing in 2 former 49ers in Drake Greenlaw, who, before his Achilles injury, one of the weirdest injuries I think we've ever seen in the Super Bowl, which
was derailed that the jumping off the sideline kind of thing.
Yeah, which derailed this season for him. I think he played in maybe 3 games, and then once the Niners were eliminated, they just were like, "Okay, you're done for now. You don't need to re-aggravate it and mean nothing games." Before that point, excellent player, one of the best linebackers in the league. Really big fan of his game. Has a really cool story too. Someone you really want to cheer for even when he's not on your team. And then this one, so like the Greenlaw deal, 3-year, $35 million contract. You really solidified the middle. Jake, I don't know about this. Hufanga for 3 years and $45 million for a box safety. That's a lot of money, don't you think?
You know what I will say? As a Raider fan, I did not like Denver getting, even though Hufanga is, yes, like more of a box safety, more traditional style safety. I think they got better on defense. Like, I think they got significantly better. I think they're more of an ascending team than a descending team. Yeah. And they just added 2 real impact players. Like Drake Greenlaw, like you had mentioned, like before the injury, was like sideline to sideline, like all over the place. So it's going to be interesting to see them kind of compete with the Kansas Cities, compete with the Raiders, compete with the Chargers. But I think they're like kind of sneaky behind the Chargers. So like I think they're fighting for that second spot in the AFC West as opposed to like maybe battling for 4 or 3.
I would agree. I just think that Hufanga deal, that's a lot of money for what he does on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, you're right. They did get better. I'm going to give them a B because I would give them I give them an A if Hufanga wasn't getting that much money. For me, for what he does, he's so one-dimensional. That's too much money for him, in my opinion. But everything else looks good to me. I'm going to give them a B.
I think I'm just going to give them a B plus because their defense was already pretty good. They have, I don't know where he stands on if you have a ranking, but like Pat Surtain's probably, if not number 1, number 2 corner in the league.
I'd agree.
They have some really nice pieces. So just adding to that defense, yeah, as a Raider fan, I'm a little bitter. I'm not happy with it.
On to Detroit. So they lose Carlton Davis. This is a team that has a great roster, but was just decimated by injury. They still have the amazing year, and then huge upset loss in the playoffs that was very unexpected to the Commanders at home. So they lose Carlton Davis. They bring in DJ Reed, who's a very good corner. I like that move. I don't think the deal, there's no number here, so I don't know if it's official yet. And then Marcus Davenport being re-signed is a good move by them. And then cutting Zadarius Smith. So I guess what they're thinking right now is find an end opposite Hutchinson in the draft, or maybe Davenport's that guy. We'll see. What do you think about DJ Reed coming to the Lions?
Oh, it's massive. Like I think you had mentioned the playoff run and them being upset. They had like nobody on that defense. Like so many injuries. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson being like the prime one, but they're a team that is going through a full rebuild in the sense of like new coaching staff. So no Ben Johnson, no Aaron Glenn. So I'm curious to see how the new coordinator hires affect them. Like a team, I think this was the first year where a team won the Super Bowl with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And Detroit obviously I think they're a Super Bowl contender. So getting like a stud corner, like I was reading articles that had DJ Reed as like the number 1 free agent, period. Like a lot of people really like DJ Reed. So that's a massive signing for them. And again, they're playing in a division with like, I mean, the Packers have 4 number 1 wide receivers, supposedly, as they said. There's a lot going on in the NFC North, and it's a power division. So I think they just keep stacking up their defense. Terrion Arnold on the other side, like that's pretty nasty. That's a solid pairing.
Yeah, and with Brian Branch being able to play safety or nickel, like they have a very versatile secondary now. They have $52 million to work with.
Yeah,
which
is a lot
for a team that's that good and if they weren't injured, that's a team that is at least making the NFC Championship. They're in a good spot. I like that they're not overspending. Right. So, yeah, I'm going to honestly, like that's a solid B plus A for me. Like they didn't make a lot of moves or anything like that, but I like that they're not overpaying.
Yeah, I would give them a good grade, basically for getting Breed, because I think that's such a dynamic signing for that defense. I'd give them a B. Yeah.
Green Bay coming in, their Lions division rival. They're going to sign Aaron Banks, a guard, 4-year, $77 million, and Nate Hobbs.
It's funny, we were talking about how Green Bay, like, there was a time when they never spent, and now they're spending like insane amounts of money.
Yeah.
The Aaron Banks one was kind of met with a bit of skepticism. Like, that's a lot of money for a really, like, a good guard, really good guard, but like, I wouldn't say he's like Trey Smith, for instance, and he's kind of making Trey Smith money. Nate Hobbs, a huge contract, like kind of stunned me a bit, but I do like Nate Hobbs. But the question for him is like his splits are so much better when he's a nickel player and he's in the slot. I don't know if he holds up quite as well outside. But in terms of like athleticism, like he's one of the, like without exaggerating, he's one of the maybe the top 10 athletes in the NFL. Like he is insane. His metrics coming out. I believe he was Illinois, but I mean, for Green Bay, like you have to keep up. You have Detroit, you have the Minnesota Vikings. Like there's a lot of offense in that division, so they needed to shore that up real fast.
And you're going to lose Jair Alexander, right? Like he has said he's not coming back. He's gone, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to solidify that spot. Again, Green Bay's a team that I can see taking a corner in the draft. So maybe Hobbs is the nickel for them. But with Alexander leaving, they need to solidify that outside spot. And as you said, like Hobbs is way better in the slot. So for their process, that I hope that's what they're thinking, because if he's going to play outside, that's not where you want him. So his coverage grade on PFF here, 103rd out of 223 DBs, right? Way better in the slot than outside. So that better be their process of thinking. And that's a lot of money. Like I know this
nickel corner.
Yeah. Like this is, you've seen so many teams find a nickel corner in the later rounds of the draft, especially with like a good draft class like this. You could have found that in the second or third round, right? Like the Commanders did that last year with Mikey Sanderson. Forget if he was a third or fourth round pick, undersized corner out of Michigan, who was great for them in the slot all year, right? He was a really big part of their defense, kind of getting a lot better and then making that kind of Cinderella run that they had, right? So I don't know about the money. Aaron Banks, again, paying a guard that much money. It's like offensive line is so valuable, but it's a guard. I think they need to find the happy place between Ted Thompson and who they have now. It needs to be kind of in the middle with the spending.
And the thing is, Green Bay is always like they find linemen. Like like Zach Palm wasn't a first round pick. They've done well identifying that spot. So it's like you know how we're seeing the Steelers now trading for a receiver. That's a position historically they're usually good at identifying. For Green Bay, it's kind of like you don't trust your guys to figure this out. I don't know. It just seems a little curious to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a C-. I think that's bad process by them.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think that's fair.
Thank you for listening to the Film Grinders podcast. Make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. From me and the guys, thank you. We'll see you next time.